shooting and one they were sniping. But we'll just turn the time over to you, and you can run the program any way that you'd like to. And so, welcome to the museum. Would you try that mic?
1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3.
Can you hear back there?
Yeah, that's good.
Well, thank you very much, and you're lucky. I didn't know this, and I have no notes. So I won't have to be tied to this, and we'll just talk about it as it was. If you don't mind, we'll start off with simply, back 100 years ago, I was flying the Jet 3 Cub, 90 miles an hour, and I thought I was the hottest thing in Alabama. And 25 years later, when I retired, I'd flown F-106 and Mark II.
Colonel, would you stand over that way a little bit?
The
Sorry.
wonderful thing about my entire career was the two hats that I wore. I was a maintainer and a pilot. I was a squadron maintenance officer for the 99th Fighter Squadron, and later on the 332nd Fighter Group. And my entire Air Force career, I went on to wing maintenance, depot maintenance, and it went well. But this afternoon, I think the thing that would probably interest you is, in a sort of micro-historical manner, let's talk about the Tuskegee Airmen. This was an unusual time and an unusual group of people. And if no other excuse, they said that if we don't listen to history, we might repeat it. And for the sake of all of these young people in here, I hope that that day and time that I became a Tuskegee Airman will never be repeated. Can you imagine? War clouds are gathered over Europe, and certainly we're not here this afternoon to talk about war, because war is a very cruel, dehumanizing, and unbeneficial thing. It pits brothers against brothers, sisters against sisters. But we can talk about those people who participate, because it is to their glory and their sacrifices that has made America the country that it is. That Constitution that we wrote and talked so much about would have no meaning whatsoever if we didn't have people like yourselves who put on that uniform and served in the armed forces to support that theory of liberty, justice, and freedom for all. But there we were, the war clouds had gathered over Europe. Hitler had invaded Poland. Mussolini had raped Ethiopia. And in America, the Ku Klux Klan were anti-Negro, Catholic, Jews, and anybody else that didn't agree with them. And this is 1939. And here in America, Negro, me, colored, black, I was a second-class citizen. I had no particular rights one way or the other, really. And a group of people, supposedly our military leaders, in 1925, at the Army War College, did a study of World War I operations. And in that study, they included what they thought was the performance of the, quote, colored man. And they were doing this for the purpose of trying to determine if there was to be another war, this time would he be used. They said that the colored man was subservient. They said the colored man was lazy. He had no leadership qualities. He was inept and certainly lacked the dexterities to operate something as complicated as an aircraft, a tank, or what have you. Therefore, if there were to be another armed conflict, he would be used as a laborer. we would be used as stevedore or some other non-combatant operation. And then that Sunday morning, December 7, 1941, there was this big thing out at Pearl Harbor. And we would war, ladies and gentlemen. We would war. I'll never forget it. I was an 18-year-old at Tuskegee in school. I was majoring in animal science. I was going to get my degree and then go on up to Cornell somewhere and get my degree in veterinary medicine. And since I had already been fortunate enough to start some flying, I was going out to Texas and I was going to fly from ranch to ranch, enjoy my flying, and practice my profession in taking care of animals. But Pearl Harbor changed it all. And the government said, we got to have a quick pool of pilots. So they said the quickest way to do it is to go out here to these state colleges, and any student with at least 2 years of college work who wants to become an aviator and can pass our physical and our written, we're going to run what was called a civilian-powered private pilots school at all of these state universities. And that was a little gentleman in Washington by the name of Senator Harry S. Truman. And what a blessing it was, because as they were writing this act for congressional record to be passed, he included all of the state universities. And that is how 6 black historical colleges got to have the civilian pilot training program. Delaware State, Howard University, Hampton Institute, Greensboro, A&T in North Carolina, West Virginia State, Tuskegee, and later on Langston in Oklahoma. And during the period of 1941 until about 43, some 300 or 400 young black men earned their private pilot's license and became aviators. Included in that were about 9 black women. Now, all of us hope that if the time came that we could volunteer for and go into the Army Air Corps. But those that did apply initially were denied applications, denied entrance. And can you imagine? We're still at war now, and our government is denying a citizen who wants to lay his life on the line. If you just make me an aviator, and I'll willingly sacrifice whatever it takes to become a fighter pilot, including my life if necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't know how deep prejudice, bigotry, and racism can become. And that's why I said initially, let's never let that development happen again in America. We can't afford the luxury of not using the most gifted thing that God's placed on this earth for this country. And that's its woman and manpower. To be used in this defense, to be used in this productivity, or however. But let's don't ever be guilty again of saying that you can't do this or you can't do that because you're Catholic, you're Jew, and you're black. That isn't how he intended it. He made this nation and the world as diverse as it is, just as he made the flowers and the trees, so that we could have that difference, give this world its color and all of the activities. So then, back to the war. It took a student at Howard University in January 1941 to sue his government. Can you imagine the citizens of this country having to sue this country to accept me for aviation for their pilot? But he did it, and the next day, embarrassed as it were, President Roosevelt and those people, they announced that they were going to offer pilot training to blacks. And they were going to send all of those who wished to be mechanics and technicians and all of that training, they were sent to Shreveville, Illinois. And there they would become technicians and mechanics. And they were going to train those who could qualify physically and mentally for pilot training. They were going to train them in Alabama, at Tuskegee. In Alabama, because they would have about 350 days of good flying weather. Because to them, the summers, July, August, when it's 105 degrees, the humidity is 90, that's still good weather to us. But they spent $2.5 million to build an airfield in Tuskegee to train colored aviation cadets. Yet down 30 miles away at Gunter Air Force Base, they were training Chinese and English and American cadets. Over at Maxwell, another 10 miles, they were doing the same thing. They said, so long as this base was equal in facility and in training, this was not discrimination. It's that old separate but equal theory that they fostered back in those days. So a lot of people said, well, why did you or any of the others under a segregated situation accept and want to go into that type of training? Ladies and gentlemen, we were Americans. Our patriotism was just as strong as any other Americans. And we loved this country in spite of her imperfections. And we knew that we had to participate in some form or fashion in the military. And all we wanted was the opportunity to do it at a level and a capacity that was befitting what we thought we were able to contribute. And I certainly, if I must die, would want to die happily as a pilot than I would a pilot in the rear ranks. And that was our justification as a group and self. So we accepted it there at Tuskegee and went into training. In this period of time, from 1941, when the training started, thank you, 1941, when the training started, until 1946, they trained of the thousands who volunteered for that program, and their selection criteria was something else. You not only had to have 2 years of college, but they gave you a very strong interest aptitude battery type of test where you had to prove almost that you were Superman. So they eliminated in the beginning, and therefore only 996 finished and were able to get through that program in that period of time. 450 of those actually saw combat: Africa, Sicily, Italy, and Southern Europe. The others that were pilots were here in the United States, and they were flying, instead of fighters, they were flying D-25s, a medium bomb group. But that's a whole other story. They never saw combat. We'll come back. There at Tuskegee, when we all got our wings, at first they were only going to have one squadron, the 99th Pursuit Squadron. But in the training process, in all good faith, they just could not eliminate everybody. So they looked up and they had enough people for 3 more squadrons, the 100, the 301st, and the 302nd. But the 99th, my unit, we finished our training by September of 42. Those are the cadets like myself. I went into the program in January of 42, and in July, 5 months, I had my commission and had my wings. The training was very rigid, very demanding, and I remember as a trainee, I really only had 2 problems. It were girls and pimples. And when I got rid of one, the other one went away. But on a more serious note, we finished our training, and we certainly thought that by Thanksgiving we were going to be in combat. We'd been down Edmund Field in that P-40, and we'd done our air-to-ground gunnery, our air-to-ground dive bomb and straight. we done our air-to-air, and it passed the Operation Readiness Inspection. We were still in Tuskegee next day. And certainly then we knew that by December, we were still in Tuskegee in December, January.
You can sit right there.
No commander from Burma to England wanted this all-black fighter squadron. They said it would create a problem. First, the officers would want to be socially equal to the white officers. And secondly, they got their system of any of the white NCOs would take any orders from a black officer or black non-commissioned officer. They belittle and derate the military services. So there we were in Tuskegee. And it was April of 1943, nearly a year from the day that I was commissioned, that they finally sent us overseas to North Africa. And there we were then, Casablanca and on into Tunis, Iran. And we were working with the Allied armies, primarily stationed with the British for logistics and administration. And we were against Rommel and his tanks and all the other German and attacking people there on the sands of Tunisia. And our mission was a new concept. It was called Close Tactical Ground Support. This was different from what Americans and most people thought fighter pilots were. They had the concept of the old Red Baron business where you were up there at 8,000 to 10,000 feet and all you were doing was running up and down the Mediterranean and chasing after the ME-109s and the 190s and trying to see how many you could shoot down. But our mission, a very hazardous, dirty, and a thankless job. Find those ammunition dumps, find those fuel dumps, find those motor transports on the highways, find those rail locomotives and supply trains, and anything else that logistically was supporting Rommel and his people. And if we found them, destroy them. And that was called Close Tactical Ground Support or Interdiction. And this we did up and down the highways and the byways there in Tunisia. We'd come back every day, shot up pretty well. Holes big enough to put your fist in your head in some of those P-40s. And we wouldn't do a thing at night but go over to the mess tent and all the number 10 cans that they'd gotten the food and stuff in, we'd clean them up and bring them out and cut them up and flatten them out and get the old rivets and what have you and go to work. By the time we got through, there some of those P-40s looked like a Maxwell House in large can. But we maintained them and we kept a good commission rate and we fought the battle. Finally ran Rommel out of Africa into Sicily, and the same thing all over again. Across Sicily and into this boot of Italy and up the boot of Italy we went. Close tactical support. All they would have to do with us is every time many times there, I remember around the Salerno area in Naples, when we take off, we'd have to go out to sea to climb up the altitude to come back in and go on a mission. Because if we didn't, we'd draw anti-aircraft on takeoff. That's how close we stayed behind the Army front line in our close support with that P-40. But be it as it may, we did all right. And of course, finally it was decided that they were going to re-invade Italy about 30 miles below Rome at a little place called Anzio. The Anzio invasion. This finally gave the United Ninth an opportunity to stop its close tactical work and serve as a cover for the invasion fleet. And this was the first opportunity that we had as a group to come face to face, eyeball to eyeball, in aerial combat against the German Luftwaffe, 109s and 190s. And that P-40, it couldn't outrun, it couldn't outclimb, it couldn't outdive. That 109 and 190 was just superior to it in every way. Now the British up at 8 and 10,000 in the Spits, they could do what they wanted to. They could fight them. The Americans up in the P-38s, could fight them. And those that had the P-47 could. But with the P-40, we only had one advantage. And of course, two really. The guts and the determination to hang in there and seek an advantage. And secondly, that P-40 could turn a smaller radius circle than that 109, simply because it wasn't as fast. So, if they didn't get you on that first attack where you'd be flying along and see them, and suddenly you'd see these tracers going by you, as long as they were below you, you knew that you were still okay. You might hear a few thumps back there on the fuselage, but it didn't smell any smoke and everything. And you'd rack that out again and start turning. And the minute you were at a point where those goggles would start sliding down on your face, you knew you had that baby sucked in there to nothing else. And about that time, you'd see that 109 or 190 go by you. And you just kick it back over. And that'd be one more that wouldn't get back up the road. And that's how we fought them there. And in the first 3 days, we shot down 17. We lost 4 or 5 men in the battle, but that's war. They got me one day, and of course there was the beach, there was the parachute, but I didn't see any fire, and I always promised that as long as it wasn't burning, I wasn't going to leave it. So I took it in on the beach, and finally a liaison L-19 came along, picked me up, and brought me back to below Naples there, and I lived to finally go back the next week or 2 and with some crew people, and we fixed that one up and patched some holes and brought it home. But be that as it may, we fought the Battle of Anzio, and we proved one thing at last, that these people that the military said would never be able to fly an airplane and could not fly and fight, did, against the best that Hitler had, defend Anzio invasion and succeeded in shooting down the aircraft and defending against it. So there we were then, and we traded that P-40 for the P-47. Another beautiful airplane in the jungle. We call it the Jug. We call it the Jug. That baby, you could put 2 1,000-pounders on the outer rigs here of the wings, and you could put a center line tank here, another bomb, and that big R-2800 and that full blade prop, it would just haul it off of that little 3,000-foot runway without any problem. And being a single squadron, it was easy. The engineers would come into one of those Italian vineyards with the bulldozer, and cut out about 3,000 feet. They put a red bell at each end of it, and that was our runway. Of course, we all had little individual pup tents, and it was left to you to where you wanted to put your house. You just go find a high grounds, and that was your pup tent. But with that old P-47, as big as that cockpit was, I was almost lost in it. I'd have to reach way over here and way over there. So again, with ingenuity, me and my crew chief, we put extensions on the bomb release and other places where I wouldn't have to move so. But the real thing, you'd sit there on the end of that runway, and you'd rev that up until the tail got light, and she'd just be bouncing. But she knew you only had 3,000 feet with that load. And you let go of the brakes, and that big 4-blade would take over. And that torque was just something. Me, I was just standing up on that right rubber, pulling the trigger. And when those 2 red barrels would come in your peripheral, you just come back on the stick. Couldn't but 2 things happen. Yeah. You were airborne, or you added another 200 feet to the runway. But we hauled that old Jug around, and it's the first time I've gone on oxygen mask, because with the P-40, you never did go above 12,000 feet. But this one, you could take her on up 18, 20,000. And you became more aggressive, more confident. Of course, then we started looking for the 109s and 190s. Got something to fight with now. And in addition to that, they put us in the 15th Air Force out of 12. Tactical work in the strategic long-range bomber escort. Let me tell you a couple of quick things about the P-47, because we only had it about 45 days. The only unit in the Mediterranean theater that sank the German battleship with pure machine gun fire, no bombs. 6 of the guys coming out of Yugoslavia one morning, and expended their bombs there in Yugoslavia. And they saw this this German destroyer there in the Adriatic. And one of the wingmen said, want me to take this position so we can report it? And this young man, Wendell Pruitt from St. Louis, says, like hell, follow me. He slid there down. And somebody on the first pass got a lucky hit somewhere, and there was smoke that came from that destroyer. Now, it was putting up a barrage of anti-aircraft fire, but that didn't stop it. We were accustomed. We didn't know how to operate if somebody was shooting at you. And into this they went. And after a while, there was a big explosion and more smoke. And they just set up a lucky ring. Round and round and round. And finally, the ship really exploded and started listing. They came back and reported that this had happened. It was reported in the debrief from the 15th Air Force. And they said, you guys really got to cut down on that bean over. You have to take in the German battleship out there. But anyway, they took one of their P-38 records, went out and took photos, and sure enough, they had sank this destroyer. This is P-47. Also in that, we started our escort into southern Germany and what have you. And this Britisher, he was talking to us about escape, evasion, and avoiding capture. He says, now chaps, I want you to know, as you fly over Germany and you look behind to your blackout here, you can always see those Alps. They're snow covered and they're sticking up 18, 20,000 feet. If something happens and you get into trouble, just turn to your left and try to make it back toward them, because there is Lake Geneva and that's Switzerland. And if anything happens, you can land in Switzerland. You can't fight anymore, but you can sit out the war. But if you happen to not be able to make it, and you have to bail out, when you hit the ground, get rid of that shoe and merge with the ground.